Okay, today we're going to talk about evil pastors who murdered their own families. Arthur B. Schirmer. Arthur Burton Schirmer, born in 1948, was once a respected pastor in the United Methodist Church in Pennsylvania. With a charismatic voice and outstanding preaching skills, he built the image of a man devoted to the community. Arthur married Jewel Bainey in 1968. Their marriage lasted 3 decades, but was deeply fractured. He frequently had affairs, while Jewel grew disillusioned with a cold family life. On the morning of April 23, 1999, Schirmer returned from a jog and found his wife unconscious at the bottom of the stairs. Jewel had multiple traumatic brain injuries, including 14 head wounds. At first, her death was considered an accident from a fall down the stairs. Because Schirmer was a well-respected pastor, no one suspected foul play. After Jewel's death, he quickly remarried and moved to Monroe County. 2001, Schirmer married Betty Jean. He continued his infidelities, most notably an affair with Cindy Musante, his church assistant. Cindy's own daughter even discovered romantic text messages between her mother and Schirmer, but everything was kept hidden. On the night of July 15th, 2008, while Schirmer was driving his wife to the hospital, he suddenly swerved to avoid a deer, causing the car to crash into a guardrail. Betty suffered a severe head injury and died. While Betty died, Schirmer was virtually unscathed, and the car sustained only minor damage. He quickly had her cremated against her wishes. In October 2008, Joseph Musante, Cindy's husband, discovered her affair with Schirmer. In despair, he committed suicide right inside Schirmer's church office, leaving behind a note of accusation. This raised police suspicions. Detectives reopened the investigation into Betty's accident and uncovered multiple inconsistencies. The car had been moving at low speed, there were no skid marks, and Betty's blood was already on the passenger seat before the crash. Investigators also found that both Jewel and Betty had head injuries, consistent with being struck by a blunt object, not accidents. In the church garage, police discovered bloodstains and evidence of cleaning. Most tellingly, after Betty's death, Schirmer quickly proposed to his mistress, Cindy, further establishing his motive to eliminate his wife. In 2010, Schirmer was arrested for Betty's murder. At his trial, in 2013, he was convicted of first-degree murder and evidence tampering, receiving a life sentence without parole. In 2014, he also pleaded guilty to Jewel's death and was sentenced to an additional 20 to 40 years in prison. The media dubbed him the Sinister Minister. Schirmer is currently serving his sentence at a Pennsylvania state prison and is certain to die behind bars. Matt Baker. In the early 2000s, in Hewitt, a small town near Waco, Texas, Matt Baker was celebrated by the community as a model Baptist pastor. He had a clean-cut appearance, a lively preaching style, and the image of a devoted husband and father. Matt married Kari Doolin in 1994, and together they had 3 daughters. In 1999, tragedy struck when their youngest daughter, Cassidy, died of a brain tumor. The loss devastated Kari, plunging her into severe depression and forcing her to rely on antidepressants. Meanwhile, instead of supporting his grieving wife, Matt revealed a darker side, harassing women in the church, searching for pornography, and facing multiple accusations of inappropriate behaviour. By 2006, Matt had begun an affair with Vanessa Balls, the daughter of a music minister. While Kari still tried to save the marriage, Matt feared that a divorce would destroy his career, so he began plotting her death. He searched online for sleeping pills, ways to obtain Ambien, and even looked into buying chloroform. On the night of April 7th, 2006, Matt staged a romantic evening to disguise his plan. He crushed sleeping pills into wine and a milkshake, tricking Kari into believing they were sexual enhancers. Once she was sedated, Matt handcuffed her to the bed and pressed a pillow over her face until she died. To stage the scene as a suicide, he typed a note, supposedly written by Kari, praising him, and placed it beside a pill bottle and wine. Afterward, Matt left the house, then returned to discover his wife's body and called 911 around midnight. At first, police ruled Kari's death a suicide, citing her history of depression. But her parents, Jim and Linda Doolin, refused to believe it. They noticed Matt's unsettling behaviour, bringing Vanessa into the home almost immediately, replacing family photos with pictures of his mistress, and even telling his daughters their mother had killed herself because she didn't love them enough. The Doolin family hired attorney Bill Johnston to investigate. Evidence soon emerged. Matt's computer history revealed searches on overdosing with sleeping pills. Eventually, Vanessa broke her silence and admitted Matt had murdered Kari to be with her. In 2008, Kari's body was exhumed. Toxicology tests found Ambien Oblivion in her system, proof that she had been drugged, not suicidal. Matt was arrested that same year and went to trial in 2010. Prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence: Vanessa's testimony, the incriminating computer searches, and statements from 12 women describing Matt's sexual harassment. After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury found Matt Baker guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 65 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 35 years. Nick Nicholas Hatchney was once seen as a model youth pastor at Christ Community Church on Bainbridge Island, Washington. With his humorous, charismatic, and devout demeanour, he and his wife, Dawn Marie, seemed like the perfect couple in the eyes of the congregation. But the truth was, from his early years as a pastor, Nick had exploited his role in marriage counselling to manipulate women in the church. He convinced them that having sexual relations with him was God's will. At least 4 women, including church secretary Sandy Glass, Annette Anderson, and even Dawn's own mother, fell victim to him. His relationship with Sandy was particularly dangerous, as she claimed to have received a prophecy that Dawn would die and she would take her place as Nick's wife. Instead of rejecting the idea, Nick replied, "I already knew." On December 25th, 1997, the Hatchneys attended a Christmas party with their community. The following morning, Nick gave Dawn a large dose of Benadryl, rendering her unconscious, then suffocated her with a plastic bag. To cover up the crime, he staged a fire, turning on a heater, placing a propane tank and wrapping paper around the bed, and then leaving to go duck hunting. The blaze consumed the house, making Dawn appear to have perished in a tragic accident. Shortly after leaving the scene, Nick called Sandy and said simply, "It's done." For years, the church and community believed it was nothing more than an accident. Nick was even supported further, using the sympathy to pursue more women. But eventually, the secrets began to unravel. Annette Anderson confessed to her husband about the affair, and he reported it to church leaders, sparking an internal inquiry. It wasn't until 2001 that Sandy Glass finally went to the police, claiming Nick had killed his wife with drugs and suffocation, then set the fire to hide it. Forensic analysis confirmed that Dawn had died before the fire started. There was no smoke in her lungs. Nick was arrested and brought to trial in 2002. Witnesses, including many of the women he had manipulated, testified that Nick admitted killing his wife in order to be free to pursue other relationships. The jury convicted him of aggravated murder and sentenced him to life without parole. However, in 2007, the Washington State Supreme Court overturned the conviction, ruling that murder and arson were separate charges. In 2008, Nick was retried and sentenced to 26 years and 8 months in prison. Eugene Kearhey, Sand Branch, a poor community on the outskirts of Dallas County, Texas, has long been known for its lack of clean water. For many years, Pastor Eugene Kearhey was the strongest voice in this fight. Born in 1976, he was both the pastor of Mount Zion Baptist Church, a more than 100-year-old congregation, and the leader of the campaign urging authorities to provide clean water to the over 1,200 black residents there. He appeared in the media, organised community meetings, and became a symbol of sacrifice and dedication. He was married to Deanna Wilson Kearhey, 51 years old, who worked in education and public health. They had 2 teenage daughters, Darren, 17, talented and passionate about music, and Cameron, 15, energetic and often involved in her parents' activities. On social media, Eugene often shared photos of his happy family, alongside prayers filled with faith. But behind that peaceful picture was a storm of financial troubles. Early in 2019, the family's home in Cedar Hill was foreclosed by the bank due to unpaid debt. On February 5th, the house was officially put up for auction. Eugene faced the prospect of losing everything: his home, his career, and his image as a pillar of the community. Under this crushing pressure, his mental state began to deteriorate. Warning signs slowly appeared. In early February, Eugene changed his Facebook cover photo to a dark background with the words, "We all have secrets." In the early hours of February 28th, he posted his final message, praying about the difficult time in my life, and ending with, "Good night, y'all," like a farewell. Just minutes later, tragedy struck. Around 4 a.m, Eugene shot himself in the head and simultaneously set his house on fire. The flames spread rapidly, engulfing the 2-story home. Deanna and their daughter Cameron died in the blaze from severe burns and smoke inhalation. Darren was rescued by firefighters but had burns covering more than 80% of her body and suffered severe lung damage. After more than a month of fighting for her life in the hospital, she passed away on April 1st, 2019. Eugene was found dead from a gunshot wound. The Dallas County Medical Examiner's Office determined that Eugene's death was a suicide, while the deaths of his wife and daughters were homicides, directly caused by the arson. There was no evidence they had been shot, dispelling the initial rumours. Police concluded the motive was primarily financial crisis, combined with psychological pressure, a textbook case of a murder murder-suicide. Anthony Hopkins. Anthony Hopkins, born in 1971, a travelling preacher, and he proclaimed himself a prophet. He built his reputation through religious revival meetings at the inspirational Tabernacle Church of God in Christ in Jackson, Alabama, and often moved between communities to preach about saving lost souls. However, behind that respected image was a terrifying dark side. In 1993, Hopkins married Arletha Hopkins, a 36-year-old woman who already had 2 daughters from a previous marriage. They lived in Mobile, Alabama, and quickly had 6 more children together, creating a family of 8 kids. On the surface, Hopkins was a devoted father and respected pastor, but in reality, he controlled the family strictly. The children were homeschooled to avoid outside contact, helping to conceal the crimes. Around 2000, when Arletha's oldest stepdaughter was just 11 years old, Hopkins began sexually abusing the girl. This behaviour continued for years, happening secretly in their own home. Everything changed around November or December 2004. Arletha, who was pregnant with their youngest child at the time, accidentally discovered her husband having sex with her daughter, now 16 years old. She became furious, screaming that he was trying to kill her and kicking Hopkins out of the house. A fierce argument broke out at night, with the young children hearing the screams. Arletha locked the door, determined not to let her husband back in, out of fear for the family's safety. However, Hopkins sneaked in through the bedroom window, carrying a hammer. He attacked Arletha, beating her to death. The children heard the screams, then silence, seeing their mother lying on the floor, her legs twitching in her final breaths. The next morning, Hopkins calmly handled it. He called the victim daughter to help carry the body, claiming it was too heavy. They buried the body in a remote area near the house. Later, worried about the decomposition smell, especially after Hurricane Katrina in 2005 caused power outages, Hopkins dug up the body, asking the daughter to help stuff it into a large freezer in the laundry room. He jumped up and down on the body to force it to fit, then sealed it with duct tape and locked it. For 4 years, the freezer sat quietly in the house as Hopkins continued living normally. To cover it up, he spread the rumour that Arletha had died giving birth to the youngest child. He continued preaching at churches, respected as a prophet. At the same time, the abuse didn't stop, and the victim daughter became pregnant in 2008 when she was 19 years old. Hopkins controlled the children through isolation and religious manipulation, making them too afraid to tell. The truth came out in July 2008 when the victim daughter confessed at the Mobile Child Advocacy Centre, recounting everything from the abuse to hiding the body. Police searched the house and found the freezer containing the body frozen for 4 years. Hopkins was arrested at a church in Pritchard, Alabama, in the middle of a service, charged with murder and abuse. The trial was in April 2010 in Mobile. Prosecutors argued that Hopkins killed his wife to hide the secret, based on testimony from 7 children. He admitted to a struggle with lust from 1993 to 2008, but denied the murder. The jury convicted him after 1.5 hours. First-degree murder, rape, abuse, incest. In May 2010, he was sentenced to life without parole, plus terms for the other crimes. Edmund Lopes. Edmund Lopes was born on September 27th, 1935, in Plymouth, Massachusetts. From a young age, he showed energy and ambition. After graduating from high school, he joined the United States Marine Corps, where he developed discipline and combat skills. After leaving the service, Lopes pursued athletics, playing semi-professional football, and married his first wife, with whom he had 4 children. They appeared to live a stable life. However, starting in the 1950s, he became involved in petty crimes such as theft and traffic violations, revealing an inner instability and a craving for excitement in a criminal lifestyle. By the mid-1960s, Lopes had moved to the suburbs of Chicago, Illinois, where he worked at Medina Country Club. He remarried, this time to Phyllis Brown, but the relationship quickly turned tense. In 1966, Lopes committed his first known attack when he stabbed and strangled his girlfriend, Shirley Johnston, in Bensonville. Johnston survived. In 1970, Lopes murdered his second wife, Phyllis Brown, by strangulation in Wheaton, Illinois, and buried her body in a shallow grave in DuPage County. Her remains were discovered months later by construction workers digging a foundation. Just days after this crime, Lopes attacked Shirley Johnston again, but she survived and was able to provide identification evidence. Following these violent acts, Lopes fled Illinois for Florida, where he committed check fraud and was arrested. He was extradited back to Illinois and sentenced to 20 years in prison for attempted murder and 50 to 99 years for murder. While incarcerated, Lopes began writing letters to a woman named Joan. He crafted an image of being reformed, claiming to have found God through reading the Bible. In 1983, after serving 12 years, Lopes was paroled, but soon violated his release and fled, moving first to Nebraska and later settling in West Richland, Washington. From 1985 to 1991, Lopes posed as a Baptist pastor, leading the First Baptist Church and fabricating dramatic stories about his past, claiming to have killed more than 28 people and to have been mentored by well-known figures such as Charles W. Colson and Billy Graham. The truth unraveled in December 1991 when a reporter investigated Lopes' real past. He was arrested for violating parole, confessed to his lies before the congregation, and resigned. In February 1992, Lopes was sentenced to an additional 3 months in prison for the parole violation. He served his time at Menard Prison and was released in May 1992 under supervision in Washington. Ernie Stokes, a retired Baptist pastor from Centerville, Alabama, was once respected in the community as a dignified husband alongside his wife, Sybil Stokes. They had been together for more than 35 years, but behind the facade of an exemplary family was a fractured marriage. Ernie confided to friends that he was no longer close to his wife and felt trapped. Worse, he became involved in an affair with a member of his congregation, directly contradicting the moral sermons he preached. When Sybil discovered the truth and demanded he end it, tensions in the household escalated. On September 20th, 2005, tragedy struck. That evening, as Sybil sat on the edge of the bed in their bedroom, Ernie shot her once in the head with a .22 caliber firearm. The shot caused immediate brain death. Instead of calling for help, Ernie spent 45 minutes staging the scene. He inflicted a minor injury on himself with a brick and then reported that an intruder had doused him with gasoline and killed Sybil. But his story quickly fell apart. Police found no trace of gasoline and no signs of forced entry or struggle. Ernie's injury was inconsistent with his account. Surveillance cameras even recorded him purchasing a box of ammunition the day before the killing. The autopsy confirmed that Sybil had been shot from a distance, ruling out the intruder theory. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered Ernie's history of infidelity and his own admissions of a broken marriage. All the evidence pointed directly to him. In March 2006, Ernie was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Initially, he faced the possibility of a harsh trial, but in 2008, to avoid lengthy proceedings, the charge was reduced to manslaughter. Ernie pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. For the community that had once revered him, this marked the complete downfall of a religious figure, while Sybil's family considered it a just price for his betrayal. While incarcerated in Alabama, Ernie repeatedly sought parole. His first request in 2013 was denied due to strong opposition from the victim's family. In 2018, the parole board once again rejected his petition, stressing the gravity of the crime. In 2023, at 85 years old, Ernie stood before the board once more, but was denied again. The latest decision postponed his next parole hearing until 2028. Terry Lee Greer, born in 1958 in Alabama, was once a respected Methodist pastor. He lived what appeared to be a stable family life with his wife, Lisa, 52 years old, and their daughter, Susanna, 18. But behind this facade of stability was a chain of pressures and health crises that led to tragedy. Greer began his ministry at First United Methodist Church in Decatur, where he was loved for his dedication. However, by 2012, vague allegations from church members led to his reassignment to Mount Vernon United Methodist in Gardendale. Later that year, he suffered 2 serious accidents. First was a blackout while driving, followed by a fall from a height of 5 to 10 meters that left him with a traumatic brain injury, broken ribs, and an irregular heartbeat. These resulted in chronic headaches, cognitive decline, and severe depression. He was prescribed multiple cardiac and antidepressant medications, which carried potential psychiatric side effects. In December 2012, Greer was admitted to Brookwood Medical Center for severe depression and suicidal thoughts. But after only a few days, he was discharged without a long-term follow-up plan. His family considered this a grave medical oversight. On the morning of January 10th, 2013, in the midst of a psychotic episode, Greer spoke of driving together to heaven, a delusion coloured by religious imagery. He then attacked his family with a .22 caliber handgun. Lisa, his wife, was shot multiple times and died instantly. Susanna, his daughter, was shot in the chest and arm as she hid in a closet. Showing remarkable courage, she wrestled the gun away and escaped to a neighbour's house for help. Greer then stabbed himself more than 10 times, but was still alive when police arrived. At the scene, he appeared almost unaware of his actions. Greer was charged with the murder of his wife and the attempted murder of his daughter. However, psychiatric experts diagnosed him with vascular dementia, depression, and a psychotic break that rendered him unable to distinguish right from wrong. In 2014, a Jefferson County judge declared him not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. defect. Instead of prison, he was committed to the Taylor Hardin Psychiatric Facility and later transferred to Bryce Hospital. During treatment, he gradually improved and expressed deep remorse. By 2018, he was released to a group home under strict supervision. He had to continue treatment, was prohibited from owning weapons, and was barred from contacting his daughter unless she initiated it. Susanna, though scarred by trauma, slowly recovered and chose to live separately from her father. Fred Jacob Neulander was born in 1941 into a Jewish family in the United States. After graduating from Hebrew Union College, he became a Reform rabbi, a branch of Judaism that emphasizes inclusion and progress. In 1967, Fred married Carol Lids, an intelligent and resourceful woman who co-founded the renowned Classic Cake Company in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. They had 3 accomplished children: Matthew, a physician; Rebecca, a social worker; and Benjamin, who followed in his father's footsteps to become a rabbi. In 1974, Fred founded Congregation Makor Shalom, a Reform synagogue that quickly grew to more than 1,000 members. He was highly respected by the community, serving as both a spiritual leader and a counselor. The Neulander family seemed perfect, but behind closed doors, Fred spiraled into infidelity. In the early 1990s, he entered into an affair with Elaine Soncini, a well-known radio personality in Philadelphia. Elaine, a widowed Catholic, had originally sought Fred's guidance to learn about Judaism after her husband's death. The pastoral relationship soon turned into a secret romance. Fred promised to leave Carol and marry Elaine, but Carol refused to divorce, fearing scandal that could harm the congregation. Fred also admitted to multiple affairs with women in his congregation. Unwilling to accept divorce, Fred devised a ruthless solution. He hired Len Jenoff, a struggling private investigator with a drinking problem, along with accomplice Paul Daniels, a former drug addict, to kill Carol. The plan was staged to look like a robbery. Fred promised to pay $30,000 and secured an alibi by remaining at the synagogue. On the night of November 1st, 1994, Jenoff and Daniels broke into the Neulander home. When Carol returned, they struck her in the head with a lead pipe, killing her instantly. Police initially believed it was a burglary, but when Fred's affair with Soncini was exposed, he was forced to resign as rabbi in 1995 and was formally expelled from the rabbinate in 1996. In 2000, the case took a dramatic turn when Jenoff confessed to a reporter that he and Daniels had murdered Carol at Fred's request. Both men agreed to cooperate with law enforcement, and Fred was arrested and charged with murder. His first trial in 2001 ended with a hung jury, leading to a retrial. In November 2002, during the second trial, Fred was convicted of murder, felony murder, and conspiracy. He avoided the death penalty because the jury could not reach unanimity, but in January 2003, he was sentenced to 30 years to life without parole. Fred's children expressed anger, condemning him as the man who destroyed their family. Jenoff received a 23-year sentence, while Daniels was sentenced to 30 years. Fred appealed multiple times, but was consistently denied. He has since lived in prison, working in social services for fellow inmates, and continues to deny his crimes. Michael Tabb. On the afternoon of August 5th, 2002, the small town of Troop, Texas, home to only about 1,900 residents, was shaken by a murder case. The victim was 35-year-old Marla Tabb, wife of Pastor Michael Tabb. For years, the Tabb family had been regarded as an ideal model. Michael, 41, had just been appointed pastor of the First United Methodist Church, while Marla, a gentle woman, was a former teacher now devoted to caring for their 2 young sons, 2-year-old Jonathan and 6-week-old David. Outwardly, they appeared to be the perfect Christian couple, but behind closed doors, their 4-year marriage was full of fractures. Michael was a heavy drinker, often frequenting strip clubs, habits starkly at odds with the image of a model pastor. Their heated arguments frequently escalated into violence. Marla confided in friends about troubling incidents in the marriage, especially after giving birth to baby David through a difficult C-section that left her exhausted. Meanwhile, Michael refused to share family responsibilities and continued to pursue his private lifestyle. On the fateful day, Michael left home with Jonathan to run errands. At the modest parsonage beside the church, Marla stayed behind to rest with her infant. During that time, a confrontation erupted, ending in horror. In a fit of rage, Michael grabbed a wooden table leg and struck his wife repeatedly in the head and face, breaking her jaw, disfiguring her, and killing her instantly. Miraculously, baby David, resting in another room, was unharmed. After the killing, Michael attempted to conceal his crime. He cleaned the scene, took Jonathan out, and later later returned pretending to discover Marla's body. He dialed 911, trembling as he claimed there had been a break-in. But police quickly found inconsistencies. There were no signs of forced entry, no burglary, and Marla's blood was discovered on Michael's shoes and in the bed of his pickup truck. On August 14th, 2002, just 9 days after the crime, Michael Tabb was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. At first, he vehemently denied the allegations, but the evidence was overwhelming. Blood traces, friends' testimonies about marital conflicts, and the absence of an intruder. By January 2003, he was formally indicted. To avoid a prolonged trial, exposing his private life, Michael agreed to plead guilty in exchange for a 50-year sentence. But on May 13th, 2003, the very day he was scheduled to enter the plea, Michael attempted suicide by stabbing himself near a pond on the University of Texas at Tyler campus. He survived but suffered serious injuries. Prosecutors later raised the sentence recommendation to 55 years, viewing his actions as a sign of instability and manipulation. Finally, in September 2003, Michael pled guilty to the murder of his wife and was sentenced with the possibility of parole no earlier than 2030, when he will be 70 years old. Okay, that's the end of today's video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to our channel to support us.